Welcome to Red Light, Green Light, the podcast where you'll hear from industry leaders in science, technology, and innovation about the power of strategic storytelling. With decades of experience, our guests will share their own insights and real-world stories to help you avoid red light barriers and ignite green light solutions. From the Zoom room to the boardroom. In each episode, we'll corkscrew downward into the guests' personal experiences of challenge and success, highlighting strategies that turn complex ideas into clear, compelling storylines for stakeholders. Here is where expert minds share stories that shape the future. What's more, you'll walk away with tips to try immediately to drive the vision of innovation with your team. Here is where expert minds share stories that shape the future. What's more, you'll walk away with tips to try immediately that drive the vision of innovation with your team. Hi, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Red Light, Green Light, the podcast where we bring to you incredible, talented guests to share their storylines in the industries of science, technology, energy, and innovation. My name is Cindy Skalicky, and I am your host. And today I'm bringing to you all a very unique individual who has done a tremendous amount in the spaces of energy and innovation. And his name is Heath Naquin. Heath, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Cindy. Glad to be here.
Yes, it's wonderful to have you. I so enjoyed our initial conversation. I'm glad that you're here with me today. I don't do this often, Heath, but I kind of wrote a little quick intro for our audience because your background is so varied and has so much richness to it. So if you'll pardon me, I'm going to introduce you with a little extra pizzazz. Currently, though, Heath, you are the Senior Vice President of New Ventures and Innovation at the Science Center in Philadelphia. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am. That's correct.
Okay.
Yep.
Awesome. Well, friends, we have so many listeners who are invested in innovation and in energy and who are either starting their own things early on or who are, up into the corporate entities and projects in large companies working on med tech or devices of all kinds. And today we're going to talk about communication at any level requires a few key pieces. But today he is coming to us as a real pioneer in the innovation ecosystem. You who are listening, who have been through I-Corps, who are at national labs, who are researching at TTOs and elsewhere, Heath's been a really pivotal figure in those areas. He actually established the Southwest I-Corps hub down in Austin. Is that right, Heath?
That's right.
My daughter was at UT Austin, so I remembered that one.
Hook
And he's
'em.
had, yeah, exactly. And he's had some strategic advisory roles with the National Science Foundation. He's just been instrumental in creating frameworks that transform how we think through innovation. So, Heath, of all the work that you've been doing, when you think about why you do it, what is the first thing that pops into your mind?
So when we talk about working with innovators, and I'll just confess, I'm a nerd. I love learning stuff. I mean, at the end of the day, it amazes me at the intellectual talent and horsepower that collectively that our innovation apparatus, we'll call it, can produce, right?
Yeah.
And whether you're talking corporate, university, what have you.
Yep.
I mean, I remember way back when we're now, I won't quite get into how many decades, but like one of the first new tech areas was on a tokamak device. I mean, we're talking about nuclear reactors. I'm like,
Oh my goodness. Yeah.
I have no idea what that's, but it's wild to learn about and see, and then more importantly, see that actually come to fruition. Honestly, 20 years later, but it's that progression. It's pretty interesting, and so as I transition into more med tech, which I've always had a thread on, I mean, for me at least, it's yes, I get to work with ventures. Yes, I get to work with venture funds. Yes, I get to work in ecosystems, but ultimately, you get to see some material changes happening for people's lives, and you get to learn about some really cool stuff. So
I love it.
that made it a long answer to your question.
Well,
Yeah.
no, it's impact, it's curiosity, it's always being in the seat of learning. what's out there. So you think of like nuclear reactors, and that's one of the things I love about the work that we do with scientists and engineers who do things I have no idea like what really it's about or it requires. We get to sit there and go like, so how does a nuclear reactor actually work? And
Right.
it's actually a good question, right? It also positions the person who's about to answer in a place of saying, okay, I'm a total expert at this, a nerd.
Mhm.
How do I respond to someone who's never had any education or information around this? So let me go at like a 12-year-old level right now and bring them up to speed, right? And that's just a
Yep.
fun place to sit when you're learning. I love it.
Yep.
I love it. So tell us about what you're working on in the, what is the Science Center in Philadelphia? What is the focus for you currently? And then we'll kind of jump into some communications trends and tips.
Well, great. And, you said 12-year-old. I say like 7-year-old because I'm sort of slow from the South. So
Okay.
at least I'm a 7-year-old.
Excellent.
It just, as you were saying that, I'm like, ask the question why 7 times and then maybe we'll
Yes.
get to the way.
Yes.
Right?
Kindergarten level.
Why is the sky blue? I'm like, because. No,
Right.
we can talk about that more later. For the Science Center, for those of you that don't know, the Science Center is a 60-year-old, or more than 60-year-old, nonprofit institution based in West Philadelphia. So we were originally created and founded by 31 academic shareholders across the tri-state region, that's Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and Delaware, with an explicit focus on building on economic development by supporting the life science economy. That's the mission of the organization.
Okay.
At the Science Center, the areas I focus on primarily are on our new venture support activities. And what for us that means is how can we fill a critical gap in the ecosystem to move capital at companies that are in the medtech space to sort of help build that overall. And I should also mention another part of that is actually attracting businesses from the medtech space into the region. So one of our flagship programs is our capital readiness program. I'll do a shameless plug for a minute.
Yeah,
And
go for it.
that program is designed for medtech founders trying to raise between 2 and 10 million
Okay.
of institutional, like real money, we'll call it.
Yeah, love it. Yep. Great.
And I know, Cindy, you and I talked, there's a thread that goes back to the very
Yes.
beginning on
Yes,
that
please.
thing. But just for the audience, the average company coming into that has raised somewhere between 2.5 million already, usually SBIR funds, phase 2.
Yep.
So that's a very normal pathway in where it's,
Mhm.
yes, we've done the research, we've got some real stuff. Oh, wait, I got to raise some real money now. And so
Yes.
that value we're trying to provide within at least that programmatic concept.
Yeah.
We do a lot more than that. If you want to look at the website, we can do it up, but I won't take up. I could talk for 15 minutes about what all we
No,
do.
it's all
But
good.
that's maybe an
Part
area to
two.
start with. Yeah, great.
Fantastic. I love it. Well, it's a curious problem, isn't it, when we get people in one room who are really brilliant at their science, at their technology, and then they need to go out and raise real money, right? And one of the things, that was my air quotes for those listening, real money. But, would you agree with this, Heath? I've heard a lot in the ether that a lot of founders just don't raise nearly enough at the first go when it's time to get going on their technology and the roadmap that's before them. I mean, there's this balancing act, right? Of like, I need some money to develop the product, to hire out, to get some researchers on staff. And yet, there's some tangential research that's like, you should ask for double what you're going for because you're going to need so much more runway than you think you need at the beginning. And fundraising takes so much time and energy. So what is your thought on that? And what are you seeing right now that people are trying to do?
Thanks for the question, Cindy. We can talk for about another 4 hours on this topic, but I'll try and anchor it a little bit with an example. So as it so happened last week, I was in Philadelphia sitting through some sessions where we were having scientific founders pitching for money, right?
Okay, great.
And I saw a massive range everywhere from we're looking for $2 million for proof of concept to this is our first fundraising, we need $70 million. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, okay, there's a big, that's, yeah, and that was the audience's reaction too. And they were like, really? Okay, great. And so I mentioned that example. we'll just say the 2 million was probably too little. The 70 million was probably not
Yeah.
realistic. So I'll
Right.
just leave it at there.
Yeah.
When we think about how scientific founders are going to convert from, and that's really how we talk about it with our companies, is they're converting their role. They're no longer the technology shepherd. They're having to convert their role into being a corporate CEO if they're going to be leading that entity, at least in a short time or for some period, right?
Okay.
Their focus has to shift in communications from the fundamental scientific promise to understanding and being able to communicate the fundamental business value and ROI on things. That's one.
Yep.
When it comes to communicating and doing the ask, and I'll get back into trends in a minute, that ask, and it's really hard. So for those of you that don't know, I was the Vice President of Research Office at the University of Texas at Austin for a decade, around most academic places around the world. I have played that game. I get it, right? And it's really hard to translate from this is the pitch I need to get the money and the support I need for just internal project development to this is what I need to communicate from a business opportunity to get funding. And so to your point, Cindy, yes, there are folks that approach it almost like I just need a bridge to my SBIR, and I'm using that example for this audience. Like I got my $2 million for only another $1 million. I can get to this next project milestone. And that's what they're pitching on. Now, that makes perfect sense from a academic projects grant funding progression.
Cross the hurdle.
From an investor perspective, they're like, wait, so what you're telling me is you want $1 million to do more research, but you haven't told me anything about what the business process is, or the business case is.
Right.
And you also haven't told me, like, what does that give me as far as a real business milestone that's going to get a return? Because just to not make sure that everybody's aware, if somebody's an investor, they're looking to make a return on money.
Yes.
And that's different than government grants. That's right. That's why they call it an investor, right?
Yeah, exactly. You're not a donor.
So, I mean, if you have your 401k and you invested in a fund and what you get is an FDA clearance and no return, you're probably not going to feel great about that. So it's the same sort of thing. So that's one example. The secondary part of what I'll say to your earlier point about not asking for enough, this is why I mentioned that translation from like scientific shepherd to sort of executive, if you will.
Yes.
It's like being able to look at it at your project, scientist, and not pointing out anybody, just saying, and saying, okay, look, now I need to build the business case for this venture, if that's what it's going to be. If so, I may need $1 million to use my previous example for my FDA clearance. That's great. But I also need to start doing my reimbursement strategy and get that lined up. I need to get my regulatory stuff completely dialed out, not just the FDA part, but like what's the next phase beyond that? Let's make sure my IP fence is squared away. Oh, by the way, I need to get some initial contracts and do some biz dev, and I need a web presence, and I need marketing, and so on and so forth.
It adds up so fast.
So all of a sudden, an investor, from an investor lens, and for those of you in the room, I'm also an active investor and an LP in a number of funds, so I have that lens too. It's like, hey, that's great, and I understand the milestone you're going for, but there's no way you're going to give me a return on my $1 million. I would rather give you 3 if you can actually articulate that you understand how these pieces fit together. The ones I just mentioned in my previous example. And then, okay, that shows and gives me some confidence that you understand where this is actually going. And oh, by the way, you've thought about all the pieces beyond just the science. Now we can have a conversation. So it's less about you don't ask for enough, in my opinion, at least. Although that's often true. It is often because it's not wrapped around the business milestones in what I've seen. Anyway.
Totally. I completely see where you're going. And it really is around, can you showcase the vision? Do you have a way to paint the picture for investors or anyone, right, on your team? Like, this is where we're headed, and this is what your money will, once invested and used correctly and well, is going to amount to for impact, for the return, and for the world that we're trying to change for certain people who are going to use or purchase our product or service, right? And so you have to show them Paris, not the airplane you're going to travel to get there. They don't care as much
Or,
about
or, or the landing gear that's a part of the plane that is going to get you to Paris.
well,
that's
and
really what
that's,
it has to be. Yeah.
yeah.
Hey listeners, super quick station break question for you. Have you ordered your copy of my new best-selling book, Red Light, Green Light? Check it out. Grab your copy today at onpoint-communications.com/book. And now back to the show.
Let's actually dive into that, Heath, because what we're really sketching here is how can leaders go from lab to lead, right? How do they get out of lab mentality? And I see this constantly in the corporate circles that we work in when it comes to researchers in branded labs at large companies. They still have lab mentality, whether it's a real actual chemistry lab or just the thinking that's stuck in the landing gear, as you said. How have you seen people do a good job getting from lab to lead?
So that's a great example. Actually, that is literally a session that we at the Science Center are leaning in more on, like
I
to
love
provide.
it.
Because it's one of the things where and I mentioned one population of groups that we're working with, but I've heard it even from like private equity partners that they're doing
Sure.
$100 million investments, and they're like, "Damn, we need to get this team to convert over to that lead
Yes.
mindset." Right. To your
Yes.
point.
Yes.
So I don't I don't know that there's a magical formula for this, to be honest with you. Not that I've seen. I
Sure.
think it has to do with the mindset shift overall, and that gets really
Mm-hmm.
hard on either side. So let me
Mm-hmm.
paint a picture. I've heard from scientists many times, including whenever I've been asking them, they're like, "You just don't understand what the heck I'm talking about,
Mm-hmm.
because you don't get it
Yep.
about the tokamak or the nuclear reactor." I'm like, "No, I don't. I really don't. I don't.
Exactly.
It's true, right?"
You're right. Mm-hmm.
On the flip side, what I don't see a lot of is when business folks tell scientists, "Hey, the business case for this is not there. I don't understand
Right.
why this is in." I don't see the converse of that conversation happen that often. And
Mm-hmm.
maybe it's because business folks are like, "Ugh, scientists, I don't get it," or whatever. Or maybe it's because scientists are like, they'll never understand my brilliance. And
Right.
both can sort of be true.
Might be true.
But back to the conversion step, those I think on both sides of the equation that can either be intellectually curious enough from the business side,
Mm-hmm.
say, let me help at least scratch the surface, see if there's something there,
Right.
and try and understand. That's good leadership on that side of things. From like, let
Mm-hmm.
me at least try and explore this. But from the
Yeah.
scientific conversion step, let me educate myself, or at least understand as best we can
Mm-hmm.
what the business side is trying to tell me in this case,
Right.
right? Because it's a two-way street of communication. That's part of,
Yes.
I
Yes.
mean, it's a principle thing, right? And so
Yeah.
I think that's one of the missing things that most often happens is it's almost
Mm-hmm.
like this, we're fighting to know whoever yells louder wins. It's like,
Right.
well,
Well, not
not
really.
really. It's more like, okay, whoever can communicate and engender that sort of shared understanding and trust,
Yeah.
that's who sort of wins, right?
Yeah.
The one other data point, I'm sorry to interrupt, Cindy, that I think is critically important, and I tell this to a lot of my companies and folks who are like, and I'm going to caution this for the scientists in the room
Okay.
that are listening. Do not believe if you're heading to a venture thing that you can just hire out. Oh, it's accounting. I'll just hire that out. Or, oh, it's HR. I'll just hire that out. Oh, it's IP. That's what my attorneys are for. Oh, I mean, I'm in charge of the science.
Okay.
Yes, maybe you are.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're going to be the CEO of a venture, it is, in my opinion, it
Mm-hmm.
is your responsibility to understand
Yes.
enough, not to mean you're
Yes.
the expert, but enough of each of
Yes.
those necessary business functions to
Yes.
provide to understand how that impacts. And so,
Yes.
but I would coach some of our scientists and whatnot. And like, for example, we have a founders program for graduate students where we're like, that's, you're way smarter than us on all the stuff,
Mm-hmm.
on all the science stuff, 100%.
Yep.
If you want to learn this other side, at least the bare minimum to help you be able to have conversations,
Yeah, absolutely.
that's what we're trying to solve for, right?
You
And
need to
so,
sound smart, right, in multiple
and you have
areas.
to know how to ask, which questions to ask.
Right. Right. And which
Anyway, I could go
exactly.
on to that for a while, but hopefully
Yes,
that's a
no, I
helpful
love that.
perspective.
Well, I think that's really important, and it lends to the inherent challenge of being a startup CEO who's hungry enough and gritty enough to take on this kind of role that does require expanding beyond their own areas of expertise into accounting or marketing, or and having a desire to and a an understanding that they do need to know enough about those things to
Right.
ask the right questions and to do the right things. One thing you said in the couple minutes before that, Heath, that I
Oops.
want
I'm
to
sorry. Whatever it was, I'm sorry.
you're totally good. No, there's a woman I met years ago who was the mentor for one of the researchers at an ICOR event, a National Renewable Energies lab runs ICOR, right, for
Yep.
researchers and for our audience who might not know. And Heidi Birch was there mentoring another researcher, and Heidi and I formed a friendship, and that's one of the ways that I ended up helping at DuPont for all these years now. But what she said to me on a recent LinkedIn post surprised me. And it stopped me because she said, I was talking about lab to lead in a post, and she said, Cindy, a lot of researchers, that is a very heavy cross for them to bear, that they might have to leave the lab, and it's very
Mhm.
emotional. It's
Yeah.
emotional. And I appreciated so much that she used that word, like emotional. It's like a breakup. It's like feeling as though you're going against everything you believe in as a researcher. And so I wonder if there are, in some cases, leaders who shouldn't leave the lab and they are just at home there, and they're obviously, not cut out for the kind of leadership beyond the lab. What do you think of that?
So I, I I I do agree with Heidi's assessment 100%.
Mhm. Mhm.
In having worked with, I mean, I used to run IUCRC. We had labs, and
Yeah, yeah,
you
yeah,
know, there's a push where it's like, okay, go do the startup. And I think
yeah.
in general, at least in the U.S. And globally too,
Mhm.
there's this we'll call it the innovation engine that we've sort of created or we're trying to
Yep,
push. It's like everybody
yep,
that has a good idea. Let's go create a startup.
right.
That's the working theory, right?
Yeah, it's the cool thing to do, right?
For me, I'm like, no, that's
Mhm.
not necessarily the right highest best use of skill sets, bluntly,
Right,
right?
right.
Um, you know, never would I, as more of a business oriented person, say, you know, I've been doing business a long time. I'm going to go build nano cathode rays. I'm ready to
Mhm.
go. I mean,
You do it.
it's just no, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
um, on the flip side, leading the lab where it's
Mhm,
not just the research, it's the
mhm.
students, it's the environment,
Right.
it's everything else. I mean, there's a lot there. And
Yes.
I tell people this, I'm like, you really want to jump off the really good train you're on to
Right,
go ride the crazy train of startups?
right.
And by the way, for all of you out there, I tell founders this, and I'll tell a story in a minute. I'm like, if you really, really want to be a startup founder, you're insane.
Yeah.
I mean, really, because that means you're ready
You're
to
insane. I love it.
run the gamut, work on all sides. You're getting ready to get your hopes crushed daily and
Mhm,
trying to persevere beyond that.
mhm.
And you're not going to have the support you probably need or want. I mean, there's going to be help, but
Yeah.
there's all kinds of stuff. I mean, people ask me like, well, how many pitches do I need to do? I'm like, the first time I raised money, it took me 67. I got basically laughed out of every one of the previous
Yeah.
ones.
Yeah, it's like as
And it's
many as
like,
it takes, and
as
you'll
many as
need
it
more.
takes, right? And so, um, this is not, it's not all the glamour and glitter that people
No,
make it out to be. It's not
no.
Shark Tank, right?
Right, right. It's totally
And
not.
so back to the emotional thing, and I see this happen. I mean, literally, we've had counseling sessions with folks like, I thought this was going to be different. I'm like,
Yeah.
hey, there's
Mhm.
nothing wrong with saying this is not where I want to be.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
okay.
Yes, it is.
It doesn't mean it's the death of your technology. It doesn't mean
Right,
you haven't contributed.
right.
And let's figure out if we can find a different CEO or somebody that can actually pair you
Mhm.
with and
Yeah.
Yes, stay on as the technical lead. Yes, there's a
Yes.
way to do that. There's ways to work this out. The CEO path is not the only path for leading the lab, just so we're clear.
Right.
And nor should you necessarily leave the lab. I mean, I remember Enroll having these like almost experiential groups for enrolled researchers to potentially be attached, but they weren't really going out. They were just being attached, right, to the company. So,
well, you can have a good idea and it can live on without having to be the one that spearheads that. So that's,
that's right.
maybe that's very freeing for people who are listening who might feel like they're a failure if they don't lead it. That's not true. So stop the mindset madness of telling yourself that and flip it to, I came up with this great idea. Who can take it further on my behalf and change the world or the people's lives that I think can be changed, right? So, well, I love that.
Sorry. Just I want to be careful on time, but just
No,
build on
yeah.
this. Separate from the scientific side, one of the core things that I think might be useful for those in the early phase of this, just as a key thing to remember.
Yes.
I don't care which background you come from. I don't care whether you're at a seed round, pre-seed, or A, whatever. The odds of that person whoever that founder is, staying CEO throughout the period and journey of that company are about it's definitely less than being struck by lightning and definitely less than becoming a unicorn.
Wow.
I mean, the reality is the executive leadership that's needed by phase often changes.
Yep.
And
exactly.
especially even as you get later on, I mean, you see CEO changes all the time in large corporations. Why? Things are changing,
Well,
work is moving, right?
I'm reading Steve Jobs right now, and I'm at the chapter where he just got, booted in 1985 for many reasons, but, one of which was that it needed new leadership until, there could be a return.
And then it comes back around sometimes, and sometimes it does.
Sometimes it does.
It's the journey of the venture versus the science. So sorry, go ahead.
No, I want to, before we have to hop, I want to tap on the concepts we talked about before we hit record, which have to do with the red lights and the green lights of trust and relationship building, because those are red lights of risk that all founders or leaders of any kind run into when they don't do it well or deeply enough prior to, forging a relationship that's long-term. And it's like a green light. When you've hit that and done it well, it can open completely new avenues for all of us who do that trust building well and that relationship building well. Can you just speak to that a little bit, Heath, as far as your experience of watching people do that well, but also how people have done it well with you? Because you're an investor, you're someone, what are some quick things people might think about or try that would advance them, especially introverted scientists? Sorry, that was like 9 questions at once, but
we'll answer this in 3 minutes. We're good.
Yeah, good.
Hey listeners, super quick station break question for you. Have you ordered your copy of my new best-selling book, Red Light, Green Light? Check it out. Grab your copy today at onpoint-communications.com/book. And now back to the show.
So I'll try and tear this, or at least break this into a couple consumable parts. So let's cover the red light first.
Okay.
So red lights, at least, and I'm making a broad sweeping statement, which,
of course.
Hey, you can dive into that, and whoever watches this can make bad comments and say I did a bad job. It's fine.
Yes.
The red lights, at least from my lens of what I see, tend to be those individuals who are trying to be smarter than they are in certain areas. And I mean that, like in med tech, it's almost a joke from an investor perspective when I hear we're going to be a fast track 510K. I mean, it's gotten so it's so cliche, and that may actually be true. So the sad part is it's gotten so cliche because everybody uses the fast way to make them sound smart. That now, even if it's true, investors are like, yeah, right.
Yeah.
Right? Okay. So it's become a weird thing.
Yes.
So the red lights, and I don't care what industry you're in. I've seen it in energy. I've seen it in other areas. It's like,
doesn't matter.
Don't use the buzzwords to try and show you know more unless you really know it.
Right.
Because it only takes somebody like 2 seconds. Like if it's me, I'm like, okay, great.
Yeah.
So how long is that going to take you? And then they say 3 months, and I'm like, get out. Because I know that's not.
Well, it's like you don't get a redo on trying to build, that initial lane. Like you don't get a redo on a first handshake step. That's just true.
Yeah, it's the same thing, right? And
Right.
now this is my one example, and the counter example to that is the green light, where it's like, I don't know.
Yeah. Yes.
It is really hard for a smart person, including myself, and I'm not even saying I'm smart, to say I don't know. Right. And it's like, for me at least, when I'm like, what's your regulatory path? And somebody goes, we've gotten a bunch of advice. I don't know if it's real or not. And I don't even know who to trust right now. So we don't know yet. And I'm just using regulatory as an example.
Hold on. Like, what does, like, when you hear that and you're like, what do you think? What do you do? Like, I know for me, I kind of lean back and go, okay, now I'm interested because this person is honest.
This goes back to, this is a fundamental concept we used to, at least I used to preach during ICOR. I don't know what they do these days, but it was like, be intellectually honest about where you're at and be open about what you know and don't know, and don't presume you know everything. And so when I think about it from an investor lens, think about it this way. If you're going to be honest enough to me, knowing I'm controlling the checkbook in theory, that could fund your project or not, and have the honesty, and it's not, I'm not going to say humility, just the honesty of saying, like, I really don't know. I'm not going to try and blow smoke, whatever. The reason from an investor lens that becomes interesting is like, well, you know what? If they can be honest now, at this early phase, that means whenever there's going to be an issue later, and there's always going to be issues, there will always be issues. They will be honest. They're more likely to be honest then, which then means I have less risk, actually, throughout my investment journey with this group than if I'm trying to watch somebody play hide the ball and I have to wonder whether they're going to be honest with me or not. And I see this play out in our portfolio.
Yeah, exactly.
All the things, right?
Yeah.
So that I think, I'm condensing it down. There's lots in that question, but I think those are the big red light, green light moments for me.
I love that. Well, if those of you who've been listening have been paying attention, you've been watching Heath fold storyline into our conversation today with some specific examples. And storytelling is a huge piece of pitching well, communicating well, creating memorable messages. And Heath, we do an awesome quick rapid fire story log exercise with teams. And I can only imagine how fast you'd be able to fill in some of the lanes of like places you've been, people you admire, things that you've done. And I know your world travels have taken you a lot of places. Is there one place in the world that you have a specifically memorable story that you'd like to end with today that is inspiring?
I have, for those that know me, if they watch, they're going to start laughing, listening. I'm like, oh yeah, I have plenty of memorable stories about places I've been. I would say I also, among other things, led the Global Innovation Science Technology Initiative for the U.S. State Department for about 10 years. Yes. And so I got to be a number of places around the world and had that opportunity. I would say, I'm not going to offend any of my global colleagues because they're like, what about us? I've had a bunch of great experiences and a bunch of colleagues all over the world. I would say, honestly, the place I've spent the most time has been Turkey. I think the Bilking Hotel in Ankara I spent 7 months of my life at. But all joking aside, really, but of course, all over the Middle East, Europe, South America, you name it, been around. And I don't know that there's any one particular place that is like, oh my God, this is one thing. I think the global lesson I have learned is the challenges are the same. Yes, that's what I was. Because it's always about people.
People are just people, no matter where they live or what they look like.
And the value, we could talk about the value proposition. You can talk about all the things, right? And talk about it from the business lens. But fundamentally, that building of trust and relationship to help move ventures, corporations, wherever you're at. That's still a
Yeah,
core component of everything.
totally.
And to
Yep.
me, it's sort of the same everywhere, really.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
No,
I think
that's
that's where communication points like this are so important.
yeah, that's a great insight to land on. And I heard someone say something very similar after having traveled the world for 30 years. It was like, doesn't matter if people have black hair or blonde hair, or tall or short or fat or skinny. They're people and culture. Yes, there are differences, but people are people. And we all want to be loved, seen, understood, respected, and
Yep.
listened to, right? So
100%.
absolutely. Heath, this was awesome. Thank you for joining me today. How can people find you the easiest? And is there anything you want folks to specifically reach out to you about as we wrap up today?
Well, thank you, Cindy, for having me again. It was a delight. And you can find us on our website at sciencecenter.org. I mean,
Okay.
come look. We have a number of different ways we support companies. And by the way, we are not exclusive to only Philadelphia. We support companies all over the world and across the U.S. So feel free to look at our programming and take a look at that. As far as on my side, I'm happy to the extent possible to, if you're trying to explore, an interplace between, like, especially in the med tech area, like, hey, we're trying to figure out how to move the innovation ecosystem forward in some way, or we're trying to figure out how to engage with more investment or whatever. Happy to at least compare notes with folks
Yep.
and see where
Yep.
it goes.
Fantastic.
And then for those of you that may be strategic partners in the medtech space, we are always looking to have those folks, interface more with the companies in our portfolio. So reach out.
Amazing. Yeah, fantastic. If you'd like to get a hold of Heath online, the last name is Noquin.
NA,
Oh,
NAQ,
sorry.
NAQ. Yeah.
Naquin, Heath Naquin. He's at LinkedIn and the website he mentioned, sciencecenter.org. Yeah.
Yes,
Thanks,
ma'am.
Heath, for joining me. All of you listening, thank you for listening. Hit share, hit like, share it with somebody who needs a little bit of momentum today. And between now and our next podcast drop, get out there, find an audience of stakeholders, and do what you can to move them from the red light of risk to the green light of go, and get out there and nail it. We will see you next week. Bye-bye.